My wife hates me. That's fine, I don't really like her either. On our wedding day, we already figured out our divorce plan. We managed to coexist peacefully for 3 months. Then my wife, who usually acts like she's above it all, suddenly started nagging me. Dressed like that? Who are you going to see? A guy or a girl? So late, when are you coming back? You have a curfew at 9. Not a minute later. I just rolled my eyes, shrugged it off, and headed out. When I found out I was marrying Karina, I was kinda happy. After all, she's my type. She's got short hair, nice features, and big dark eyes. She's fit and her legs are long, and she's got this cool walk. But no amount of coolness could make up for her sharp tongue. Right before the wedding, I overheard her talking to her friends about me. Handsome? Can you eat off looks? What's he even good for? You're so shallow, falling for a photo? I rolled my eyes inside. If you dislike me so much, why even bother getting married? Obviously, despite the complaints, the wedding went on. Karina and I were promised to each other by our grandfathers. They fought together in the war. Back then, it was all the rage to arrange marriages. So we were kinda stuck with each other. The thing is, my grandpa's health took a turn, and his last wish was to see me and Karina get married. So everyone scrambled to make it happen. It's been 2 months now since the wedding. That wedding for good luck idea might have something to it. Grandpa, once receiving critical notices from the hospital daily, got better after the wedding, enough to leave the hospital. Now he's healthier than ever. Next week is Grandpa's birthday. While flipping through magazines looking for a birthday present watch, I heard some noise at the entrance. I looked up, and it was Karina. She was in a sharp suit, her long legs and rigid posture making her look pretty slick, though her face was all stern as she loosened her tie with an impatient but casual gesture. To be honest, she looked pretty cool. When she saw me on the couch, she paused and walked over sharply, still holding the tie. With her serious expression, I almost thought she'd tie me up for a second. She stopped just a couple feet away and said, "You know Grandpa's birthday is next week, right?" I nodded. "The family's planning a big deal, so we'll have company. We gotta stay over in the old place near Songshan." I nodded again. She was quiet for a moment, like she had more to say. I waited. "We have to share a room," she finally said. "So what?" I looked up at her. She looked back at me, like daring me to argue. After a long pause, she relaxed and replied arrogantly, "Just letting you know." Then she turned and walked away. I just gave a little snort, like I care about sharing a room. Grandpa's 88th birthday was a grand affair. Guests were invited in order of family ties and status. There was even a thick guest list delivered to me. I flipped through a few pages and thought to myself, no wonder their family is so well off. Karina walked in just as I finished a shower. Instinctively, I tightened my robe, brushing past her to the bathroom to dry my hair. We didn't speak. When it was lights out, lying there holding the blanket, I stared at the dim ceiling, controlling my breath. Not exactly nervous, but I wasn't completely calm either, even though it wasn't like she was interested in me. She made it clear when we planned our divorce on the wedding day. We agreed, act like a loving couple until Grandpa passes and then divorce. Her grandpa's happiness was the sole reason for the marriage. She was eager to split up, and there was no way I'd cling to her. We had an agreement about the divorce. Nearly asleep, I heard Karina. "Guests start arriving tomorrow. Remember your promise." Drowsily, I mumbled, "Play the happy couple, right?" I remember. There was a pause. She suddenly sat up, the mattress shifting, jostling me slightly. I looked up groggily, spotting her reaching for the water on the nightstand, quickly gulping it down. As I drifted back into sleep, her hoarse voice broke the silence. "Can you stop talking like you're flirting all the time?" My sleepiness vanished, leaving me baffled. Who was flirting? And if I was, it sure wouldn't be with a big oaf like her. Irritated, I turned away. "If you don't like it, don't talk to me." The rest of the night passed quietly. It was birds chirping outside that woke me the next morning. The old house in Songshan had great landscaping. Trees surrounded the area, and from the second-floor window, all you could see was green. Waking up, I sensed something off. Something stiff and not my soft, cozy blanket. I blinked blearily, and there she was, Karina, in my arms. I gasped. The sound woke Karina. She frowned, opening her eyes, and seemed just as surprised as me to find us so tangled up. Swallowing hard, I said, slowly, I'm usually a calm sleeper. She didn't respond, just gave me a sharp look as if to ask how we ended up with me draped over her. Hurriedly, I pulled away. No explanation came to mind, so I blurted, "Who knows if you tugged me over on purpose?" "You clung to me," she retorted, her voice low and slightly raspy. It was oddly alluring, if not for the words themselves. "You grabbed my arms." She threw me a dismissive look before getting up and out of the bed, leaving me to stew. Watching her cool and indifferent back, I thought bitterly, she laughs now, but we'll see who's crying later. The shock from waking up wrapped around Karina stuck with me. Desperate, I texted Gary, an ex-roommate. "Am I a restless sleeper?" His reply was quick. "Buddy, sometimes I wondered if I was sleeping next to a corpse. Then what about this whole Karina situation?" I glanced at Karina, just out of the bathroom. Her hair was still wet, droplets dripping down her resolute jawline, tracing her neck before disappearing under her shirt, soaking a small part of her chest. I licked my lips absent-mindedly, and a wild thought flashed through my head. Am I into women now? To be honest, Karina's an undeniably alluring woman. She had a wild streak in her youth, and her grandfather sent her to the military. It didn't tame her entirely. Entering her family's business, she kept a firm handle on things, her bold nature becoming a sort of cool confidence. Two completely contradictory traits blend perfectly in her, making her incredibly captivating. Too bad she opens her mouth. Her record of questionable behavior is enough to take her out of the category of normal women for me. To avoid repeating the chaos from the morning, I tidied up a bit before bed. I lay flat, legs together and hands neatly on my stomach, with the edges of the blanket tightly tucked in. Even if Karina tried to steal the covers, I wouldn't budge. I thought that would do the trick, but nope, the next day I woke up in the same position, still clinging onto Karina with her fierce sleeping habits. Karina raised her eyebrow casually. I scratched my head, feeling defeated and questioning everything. Why is this happening? Am I really that into her? I complained. Did you really snuggle into my arms on purpose? She just gave a mysterious smile. Karina reached for her phone, tapped a few times, and showed me the screen. She said, "I knew you'd deny it, so I took a photo." In the photo, my half-profile is visible from above, with her body snugly in my embrace, looking like a helpless bird. My cheeks flushed instantly, embarrassed by my antics and that picture. Our size and skin color difference added a certain visual intensity, turning the crisp morning air into a soft warmth. Karina seemed to feel the same. She put down the phone and cleared her throat awkwardly. "Got nothing more to say, right?" I sulked. "You had time to take a picture, but couldn't push me away?" I stared at her, trying to see through her eyes for the truth. With an innocent face, she said, "I did push. You always come back. What kind of person says stuff like that?" Angrily, I shouted, "Next time, kick me even if it kills me." She gave me a sideways glance. "Why are you whining?" Then she got out of bed. Who was whining? I swear, Karina's got issues. Like, talking to people seems like flirting to her. I observed her during the day, and she spoke normally to others. It's just with me that she acts so flirty. She gets annoyed when I act flirty. Basically, when she hears me talk, she's annoyed. I've never felt this unwelcome in my life. It makes me want to bite her. But we still have to act lovey-dovey in front of others. Trying to maintain the act got tiresome real quick. I was so frustrated. I decided to fight back. If I can't annoy her to death, maybe my antics will. I deliberately wrapped my arm around hers, all friendly-like, calling her wifey and sis alternately. Karina looked at me with shock, like she just took a big hit. She shook off my hand clumsily, scratching her arm as if my touch left goosebumps. Then she chugged a drink from a tray. I chuckled internally and whispered, "Grandpa's watching." Grandpa was, indeed, smiling at us from a distance. Karina glanced over and stiffened as if turned into stone, unable to move. She looked deeply begrudged but couldn't do anything. I almost laughed out loud. So, I kept at it, getting bolder and more outrageous. I spent the whole day clinging to her, even though Karina was over it. By the end of the day, I was disgusted by myself too. Back in the room, I couldn't even talk to Karina. I piled up the blankets and pillows on the narrow chaise by the window, deciding I'd crash there for the next few nights. When Karina came in, she hesitated. "Why are you sleeping there?" I explained, "So you don't worry about me taking advantage of you." She was silent. Later, with the lights out, she asked, "Isn't it cramped?" "It's fine," I said, flipping over on purpose. After a moment of silence, she added, "You move around a lot. Don't fall." I retorted, "Why do you care?" She fell silent. So, Karina and I got stuck in this weird cycle. During the day, we were all over each other, acting like a picture-perfect couple. At night, it was like we were roommates, not speaking a word more than necessary. I didn't know what Karina thought about it, but it was messing with my mind. At least the big birthday event was wrapping up. Today was the final, most important day. Lots of people to schmooze with. I kept smiling, nodding, chatting, and toasting with them, becoming like a machine. Even though I only took tiny sips, I drank quite a lot by day's end. Feeling tipsy, I covered my mouth and muttered to Karina, "I'm not feeling great," heading back to the room. She glanced at me, then nodded. I must have been seeing things or was really drunk because I thought I saw worry in her eyes for me. With a spinning head, I rubbed my temples and stumbled back to the room. Exhaustion took over, and I let my thoughts wander into oblivion. Next thing I knew, it was morning. The chirping birds were a nice surprise. My eyelids felt heavy, refusing to stay open. I gave up on trying to turn over, only to find every bone in my body felt like they'd been soaked in vinegar. Confused, I peeked open an eye and saw Karina fast asleep. Thanks to the last couple of times, I didn't panic. I started to move away quietly, then realized she had me in a tight hug. I couldn't move an inch. I pushed at her and saw that we were not exactly fully clothed. I snapped awake, my mind racing, trying to figure out if we hooked up last night. Karina woke up, saying right away, "I'll take responsibility." She sounded pretty sincere. I gave her a side eye. Shrugging off her arm, I grabbed a robe and made my way off the bed. Had to abort that. My legs were too wobbly. Almost hit the ground. My voice came out raspy, barely there. Karina hesitated, hands hovering behind me just in case I needed support. I ignored her, heading straight into the bathroom. Locked the door. I looked at my reflection, letting out a huge sigh. 3 rounds of cold water splashes helped clear the fog in my head. Fuzzy memories came back. Was I the one who started things last night? Bits and pieces fluttered to my mind. Karina gently wiping my face, my grumbling about the bed being too hard. She sweetly carried me to a softer bed, yet I couldn't stop complaining about my tie being too tight. She obliged every silly demand of this drunkard, and I, like a silly pup, slobbered all over her face in gratitude. From there, things just spiraled out of control. It was a night of wild chaos and bliss, from what I could vaguely recall. With hands over my face, I felt overwhelmed by this whole situation. Faking being lovey-dovey isn't cool, and purposely being overly affectionate is even worse. Not being able to separate dreams from reality is the worst of all. I was pretty dry, but I took a shower anyway. The warm water helped clear my foggy mind. Finally ready, I opened the door and found Karina all dressed up. Before she could even start speaking, I jumped in. "Look, we're adults. Last night was no big deal. Let's just forget it. Okay?" She paused, then said, "I'm not that easy." "Well, I am. Happy now?" I looked at her and reminded her of what she said before. She stayed silent, not sure if she forgot or just didn't want to say. I reminded her, "You said you'd divorce after Grandpa passed away." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then there was a knock at the door. Karina's mom was calling us down for lunch. That was when I realized it was noon already. Sleeping in was embarrassing, so I used Karina as a shield and sent her out first. I'm not sure what she said, but as I stepped out, everyone gave me looks of concern. as if I was some endangered panda. Anyway, the birthday party was finally over, and we went back to living our separate married lives. Still, what happened that night was like a thorn in my throat, occasionally pricking at me. Worse yet, every time I saw Karina, those thoughts popped up. Even with her in a shirt, my gaze shamelessly traced her body's outline. It was really driving me nuts, so I asked Gary for advice. He called me hopeless and took me to a fashion show. It was a fancy beach-themed spring-summer women's swimwear show. Front row, so close you could almost touch. Beautiful models strutted my way, some even giving me flirty looks. After that, Karina didn't seem like a big deal anymore. The show was like a reset. When I got home, I was at ease seeing Karina. But then, she shoved her phone in my face. "Is this you?" Turns out, there's a pic from the show with me drooling over a model. I confidently said, "Yeah, that's me." "You." She looked so mad I swore she was about to burst. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Our family is traditional. Events like this are a no-go. Stop attending these shows. They're shameful. She gritted her teeth. "You're my husband." I shot back, "Not for much longer." Guess I really ticked her off. She didn't talk to me for days. Honestly, she didn't talk much to me before either. But after the birthday party, she acted weird, trying to chat me up for no reason. She'd even report to me when leaving for and coming back from work. It was awkward. Now that things are back to normal with our typical distant marriage, I'm quite content. When Gary got dumped, he invited me to a bar for some drinks. I gladly went. In the living room, Karina sat on the cashmere rug, dressed in a simple black loungewear, working on her silver laptop with documents around. She had a serious business vibe. I walked right past her, but she suddenly spoke up. "Dressed like that? Where are you going? With a guy or a girl? It's late, when will you be back? Curfew's at 9, don't even. You've got to be kidding me." Recently, she barely acknowledged my existence, and now she's doing this whole lecturing routine? I turned back, rolled my eyes at her. Seeing she noticed and was too stunned to react, I calmly walked out. The bar was owned by a friend. When I arrived, Gary was already a drink in. In the VIP section, Gary was surrounded by friends and a few unfamiliar faces, both guys and girls, lively as ever. I quietly asked him what was up. Thought he wanted a drinking buddy for a heartbreak. He whispered back, "Just ran into them. Had no choice." I paused, smiled, and raised my glass to toast the group. Someone said, "Where'd you find this handsome guy? Gary? Never seen him before, keeping secrets, huh?" "He's taken," came a voice. I looked up. That person seemed familiar, like Karina's brother, with the same distant vibe. I nodded, feeling slightly uncomfortable. Then another guy exclaimed, "Oh, Karina's husband? The not-so-close one. What's this about?" Suddenly everyone was interested, and they shared stories about it. I was baffled that this gossip was so widespread. The not-so-close incident happened at the swimwear show with Gary. Before the show began, a random guy asked me what to gift Karina for her birthday. To be honest, I didn't even know her birthday was coming up, let alone what she liked. I laughed and told him I don't really know Karina that well. He looked puzzled but didn't say anything and walked off. Seems like he told everyone everything, probably even shared my pics from the show with Karina. The group erupted in laughter, finding it amusing. I was pretty embarrassed. Thinking the subject would change soon, I was wrong when the other person involved in this story showed up. "Karina, over here," someone shouted. I looked over, seeing her amidst the crowd. She was in a different outfit now. Gone was the simple black wear, replaced with a red dress, hairstyled. She looked pretty good. She walked over, drawing eyes, like some sort of flower in a field. For some reason, it was a bit embarrassing. Maybe because we're linked by marriage. I avoided making eye contact. The guy next to me gave up his spot. Karina sat beside me, bringing her unique scent with her. It's an indescribable scent, but when you catch a whiff in bed, it guarantees a good night's sleep. She quietly asked, "What were you all talking about?" Someone joked, "We were discussing how Peter's not familiar with you." "Oh," she replied blandly. She placed her phone on the table carelessly. It lit up just then. Someone peeked and let out a huge gasp. That noise sparked everyone's curiosity. All eyes turned to Karina's phone screen. She didn't hide it, letting everyone see. I glanced over and my face turned beet red. Her lock screen was evidence from before. That photo where I was all tangled up with her, sound asleep. The lock screen totally shattered the rumor that Karina and I weren't close. I mean, judging from that photo, we were obviously pretty close in bed. Everyone's teasing or flirty stares almost melted me away. Even though I was embarrassed, I had nowhere to vent my frustration. I sneakily reached under the table to pinch Karina's waist. I wanted to throttle her, but when I did, she seemed startled as if she'd been jolted. When everyone noticed, Karina just smiled slightly and playfully said, "All right, stop teasing, or else Peter won't let me off the hook." And just like that, a second wave of teasing glances came our way. I forced a smile and clenched my fist under the table. Karina was subtly showing affection all night. She didn't even need my help to do it. She would just glance at me occasionally, stop me from drinking too much, or pass me a fruit plate when I looked bored. By the end of the night, everyone thought she really loved me. Even Gary was convinced, saying I didn't know how good I had it. Honestly, I was flustered. I suspected Karina was getting back at me for embarrassing her at my birthday party. Finally, the evening ended. Since we'd all had a bit to drink, our family sent drivers to pick us up. Karina and I sat on opposite sides of the back seat, staying quiet. I figured it'd be a silent ride home, but then she suddenly said, "Don't drink outside anymore." "Why should I listen to you?" I blurted out. Maybe it had been an act of defiance after playing along all night. She turned to look at me and said, "Do you remember what you were like last time you got drunk?" That got me. Drunk me had hugged and kissed her, acting like a puppy. So I went quiet. She kept watching me, then her voice was a bit softer. "Can you not sit like that?" I couldn't see any issue with how I was sitting. So I didn't bother changing my posture, just resting against the car door, feeling like I had no bones. I snapped at her, "If you want to boss someone around, go do it at the office. I'm tired. I don't want to talk to you right now." "Clothes," she simply said. I looked down. My top was already short, and sitting like this made it ride up a little, showing some waist. I didn't think it was a big deal, though. So I grumbled, "If you don't like it, just close your eyes." The driver in the front had discreetly put down the divider between the seats and left a little blanket at our disposal. Karina grabbed it and threw it over, covering the exposed area. Her move made me want to laugh at how ridiculous it was. I sat up, looked at her and asked, "Did you take the wrong pills tonight?" "No," she said. "I'm your wife." Since the divider was soundproof, I boldly replied, "A wife we're going to divorce eventually." "No, we aren't," she replied, pausing. "Even if your grandpa passes away, we're not divorcing." Suddenly, I felt tense. "What are you trying to say?" Her eyes were suddenly determined as she looked at me. "I like you." I just couldn't wrap my head around it, how Karina ended up liking me. But ever since the birthday party, her attitude had been hot and cold, sometimes even a little possessive. I restated firmly, "That night was really just an accident. Don't feel like you need to like me because of it." "There's really no need," I murmured. Her face darkened a bit, but it didn't faze me one bit. What I was really scared of was Karina liking me. "It's not because of that night," she said. "Then why?" I asked, falling silent when she didn't answer. "Didn't you dislike me before?" I tried to remind her of what she found annoying. "I'm so needy, always whining, picky with food, slow to do things. Other than looking good, I've got no redeeming qualities." For every point I mentioned, her face got a shade darker. "Weren't those the things you hated?" I pressed, before she took a deep breath, seemingly swallowing back her frustration. Her face softened a touch, and she said, "But now I like them." After a short pause, she turned to me. "So what do we do?" "I like you," she confessed. "Your whining, your slowness, your pickiness, I like them all." The sound of my heartbeat was loud in my ears. Her eyes were too bright, and I couldn't look directly at her. I turned my head away and surrendered, "Well, I guess if you like me, you like me." I figured someone like Karina, so proud and aloof, wouldn't actually do anything even if she liked someone. But boy, was I wrong. She went straight to seduction. Suddenly, I often found her swimming at the pool downstairs or running on a treadmill in the living room. Every time she wore next to nothing. She'd be there with this intense expression, drenched in sweat. It was like the air was thick with hormones. The whole scene was intense. It happened so often I started to feel a bit overwhelmed. Swimming? Sure, fine. But running with so little on? What could I do? Had to bear it. Covering my warm nose, I'd pour myself a huge glass of ice-cold water and quickly retreat upstairs. As time went on, Karinas' teasing grew even fiercer. With a face and figure close to perfection, you'd think she'd keep a straight face and act all cool. But when she dropped that act and turned up the charm, there was no way someone with weak resistance like me could withstand. I didn't even dare to hang around the house much. I started spending afternoons in a cafe more often than not. Gary and I had opened that cafe right after graduation. I supplied the funds, he managed it. I didn't visit a lot, so showing up several days in a row caught Gary's curious eye. He wondered what was up. I shook my head but sighed internally. There was a femme fatale at home. Then, suddenly it was Karinas' birthday. We went back to the family house for lunch. On the way back, she asked if I'd join a few friends to celebrate that night. I shook my head and said, no, it just didn't make sense. Since we were bound to separate, best not to get too involved. Easier to break up later. Okay, she said, her voice sounding a little flat. I strangely felt a bit guilty. I mean, it was her birthday, and my response seemed a bit cold-hearted. Trying to make up for it, I awkwardly offered, happy birthday, have fun. Thanks, she replied in a distant tone. She got back really late. She seemed pretty drunk, and surprisingly, it was Gary who brought her back. I hurried to help them into Karinas' bedroom, watching as they carefully placed her on the bed. I couldn't help but ask, how'd she end up this smashed? She drank way more at Grandpa's birthday and was fine then. One of them hesitated. Karina downed everything offered tonight. We got carried away since she was drinking so easily. Another added, she didn't seem in a good mood, saying nobody cared if she drank, nobody to stop her, so she was blowing off steam. I blinked. Was she blaming me for not being there? After seeing her friends off, I turned to leave but caught a glimpse of her lying on the bed. She looked uncomfortable with furrowed brows and lips pressed tight. I hesitated for a moment, hearing her let out a soft moan. In my mind, I was just returning a favor. But then Karina opened her eyes, and we just stared at each other. She stared blankly at me, her eyes a bit red, her cheeks flushed with that tipsy blush, looking innocent and shy in a way. I pushed her away like I was burned. It got awkward real quick. Just as I was about to say something, she rasped, I'm willing. I gave her a look. I thought, what do you mean you're willing? I haven't even said I'm willing. Drunk Karina quickly fell back to sleep, but I was done with helping her. Whatever, it's not me who's uncomfortable. I shut the door and left in a hurry. That whole night, I tossed and turned, couldn't sleep at all. Kept thinking about Karina's face when she said she was willing. I was shocked, but more than that I felt anxious. Drunk Karina, telling me she was willing. That was it. But it got my heart racing. It's scary. I even started doubting my strong decision to divorce her. I gave in. Karina is definitely charming and dangerous. To avoid falling deeper, I should keep my distance. So I decided to move out for a few days. The next morning, I started packing my bags when Karina suddenly knocked on my door. Thanks for last night. You heading out? She was staring at my luggage. It was awkward, yeah, just going on a short trip. But, could you maybe delay it? Jackson's coming over and he really wants to hang out with you. Jackson? She nodded. Jackson is her nephew, 4 years old and super adorable. Every time he sees me, he dives into my arms and calls me uncle, then gives me a big kiss on the cheek. It's just heart-melting. I promised to play with him and agreed he could come over, so it wouldn't do to break a promise to a kid. I put my luggage back. At 3 in the afternoon, the little guy rolled in with his suitcase. He wore a tiny suit, looking quite the gentleman, and said in his sweet voice, sorry for the trouble. That was just too cute. I reached out and ruffled his hair. Then he acted true to form, reaching out to Karina. Auntie, pick me up. Karina was all affectionate, squatting down and scooping him up, bouncing him like she was weighing him. The big and the little made an adorable scene. Watching Karina enjoy his cuddles, I playfully asked, "Who's more spoiled, me or him?" Karina thought for a moment, then said, "You." I was surprised. I can't possibly out-cute this little charmer. This kid's born with it. Maybe something clicked wrong in my head, but I instinctively opened my arms to Karina too. Karina looked stunned. I was stunned too, and kind of frustrated at my silly move. But there was no turning back. Gathering courage, I mimicked the little guy's tone. "Honey, hold me." Karina's expression shifted. The next second, holding her adorable nephew, she stumbled away. The whole scene was hilarious, and I laughed out loud, thinking, after being teased by Karina so many times, I finally got one back. Jackson is one of those super well-behaved kids. He's quiet, loves to smile, sweet-tongued, and obedient. Just a delight to be around. With just one hiccup, he wanted to sleep with me and Karina. When he first asked, I immediately suspected Karina. Had this little guy been brought in as an assist by Karina? Karina acted all innocent, mouthing, "Up to you." The little guy tugged one of my hands and one of Karina's and whined, "Please?" I melted and agreed. There was a kid in the middle, so nothing could happen. We decided to sleep in my room. To hide the fact that Karina and I, the plastic couple, were sleeping in separate rooms, Karina snuck her stuff into my bedroom when the little guy wasn't looking. In the shower, I glanced at those personal items of Karina's and felt a bit off. That unease only magnified when I returned to the bedroom. Karina and Jackson were snuggled up at my headboard, deeply engrossed in a storybook. Karina read, Jackson listened, occasionally asking questions. Karina was patient, and her voice was calm and pleasant in the quiet night. The image was so warm, it felt like home, especially when Jackson patted the space next to him, urging me, "Uncle, come here." It really felt like a family of three. I cleared my head of inappropriate thoughts, lifted the blanket on one side, and got in. Jackson immediately scooted over, hugging me and sniffing like a little pup, then mumbled, "Uncle, you smell nice." Karina paused, then didn't read on. I patted his back. "Sleepy?" He nodded. I turned off the light. Jackson, tired from a day of play, quickly fell asleep. Yet I couldn't sleep. Listening to Karina's breaths, I knew she was awake, but she didn't speak. Her unique scent drifted to my nose, marking her presence. She didn't need to do anything, yet she had such an impact on me. I realized how wrong I'd been. I thought with a kid around, nothing would matter between me and her sharing a bed. But obviously it mattered a lot. Is Jackson tough to handle? "Thanks for dealing with him," Karina suddenly whispered. I didn't respond. That's something a wife says to her husband, yet doesn't apply to us. She chuckled softly, speaking even quieter. "Are you asleep?" "No," I replied. "Then why ignore me? I don't want you saying I'm whining again." She chuckled more, her laughter shaking the bed. "Why so grudgy?" She laughed. "I'm just like that," I mumbled back. "Then I like it," she said. Suddenly, I felt my face get warm, and my body started heating up too. I kicked the blanket a bit and turned away, deciding not to talk anymore. For those few days, Karina canceled a lot of her work just to focus on spending time with Jackson. I thought I could finally catch a breather, but then Jackson kept insisting I play too, so it turned into me and Karina both playing with him. It was fine at home, but if we went out, whether it was to an amusement park or aquarium, people always thought we were a family. At first, I felt anxious. After all, I wasn't the kid's dad, and Karina was a wife I was about to divorce. But as it happened more, I got numb to it. A family's a family, even if only on the surface. Soon enough, it was Jackson's last night with us. The little guy wrapped one arm around me, another around Karina, laying them on his soft little tummy. "Sai, going home tomorrow, I'm really gonna miss this," he said. I rubbed his tummy. "I'll miss you too." The little boy suddenly perked up and hugged his auntie, swinging her arm like a child. "Auntie, when will you invite me over to play again? I want to come back." Karina coughed lightly. "Next time, maybe." Something feels off. Karina had told me the boy insisted on coming here. I pulled the little boy close, whispering, "Jackson, did Auntie invite you to come play?" He said, "Yeah, I haven't even finished my homework yet." I glanced at Karina. She looked nervous and a little guilty. The truth was clear. No wonder he's been pushing Karina and me together lately. He was playing matchmaker. I shot a knowing look at Karina and cradled the boy to sleep. She seemed like she wanted to explain, but I cut her off with, "Jackson wants to sleep." I was annoyed. Karina actually used her nephew to lure me. What a tactic! In the middle of the night, I was woken up. Careful not to wake Jackson. Still groggy, I was led, quietly stepping out of the room. She stopped in the hallway and confessed. "I admit it, I brought Jackson here." "Oh," I replied coldly. Her voice was pleading. "I didn't know how else to make you like me." She said, "It was a stupid idea from my friends. They said having a kid around would help." I hesitated, but when you started packing to leave, I panicked. And here we are. I scolded her. "You're an idiot. They meant a kid of ours." Karina cheekily asked, "Would you like that?" I was speechless. She seemed to be waiting for my answer. "But I'm not a kid." Suddenly, there was noise from downstairs, maybe the aunt up for a bathroom break. The noise was erratic. I held my breath. "We won't be discovered, will we?" I was still scared. We stayed closely together, breathing each other's air, until the noise stopped. I nudged Karina, but she didn't budge. She hoarsely asked, "When will you say yes to me?" I played dumb. "Say yes to what? You know?" I thought and asked, "When did you start liking me?" She couldn't pin a time but said, "When you snuggled up to me back then." I lost it. I felt embarrassed and denied. "When did I ever snuggle up to you?" She said, "I have proof." I dreaded that photo and accused her. "So you didn't push me away then, right? You pretended to be all innocent. Admit it, you enjoyed it." I scolded. She admitted softly, "Yeah, it was nice." She pinched my waist, whispering, "So, when will you promise me?" I felt a tickle and wanted to pull away, but there was no retreat in her embrace. Her eyes were intense and determined. I gave in. "Depends on how you behave. You already said yes." She cheekily kissed me. After Karina and I became official, the first thing she did was introduce me to her friends. She said I left her teased by her friends for weeks after I claimed not to know her well. Even though some of those rumors got crushed, the gossip was out there. Today, we're here to clear things up. Right before going in, Karina grabbed my shoulder, staring intently at me. Seeing through her thought, I said, "Relax. I'll give you face in there." Karina shook her head. "No, I'm regretting it." She said, "You look too good, and it's all women in there. Let's just skip the meal and go home." She led me to exit, but the door opened and we were pulled in. A few familiar faces from the bar and others I didn't know were watching me. I was okay, but Karina wasn't having it. She cleared her throat. "Get a sense of who's here and stop staring." The room went quiet. I felt embarrassed. Some looked like they were holding back laughter. Someone couldn't hold it and laughed. "You teased us before, and now look at you. Are you like this when in love too?" Karina shot back. "Is your husband more handsome than mine?" "My husband's the best." Another chimed in. And just like that, a group of women debated whose husband was the best looking, as if there were a prize. Karina seemed especially into it. I didn't know she had such a habit of bragging about me. Feeling shy, I sipped my tea quietly. I learned more about Karina's past during all the chatter. Never dated, no guys she liked, and if not for her grandfather pushing a marriage, she might still be single. I looked at Karina, still surprised. She has everything on paper, looks, background, so how come? On the way home, I asked her. She replied, "It's not that I couldn't. I just didn't want to." Whatever crossed her mind made her smile. Back then, I thought it was just trouble. I glared playfully. Thinking about a future with Karina left me dazed. I asked, "And now, what do you think?" She stopped the car, looking sincerely at me. She said, "All my heart is yours. What do you think?" I shook my head. "Not good enough, say it again." She continued, "Want to be with you forever. No divorce. Just us." I laughed. "Isn't that cheesy? Say it again." She started again, want you. Halfway, she muttered, disgusted. How come you're so needy? I owned up. What can I do? I am needy. So what now? With a voice mingling helplessness and hope. Of course, love you forever.